welcome to the stage my panel of experts for this morning's discussion. And so starting with Juan Mateos-Garcia, who's the Director of Data Analytics at Nesta. Juan leads a team of data engineers, data scientists, data visualization developers, policy experts, and ethicists using data analytics to advance Nesta's missions. And he's interested in how data analytics techniques, such as machine learning, can be combined with other methods to achieve societal impact. Secondly, we have Danil Mikhailov, who is the Executive Director of Data.org. Danil has over 20 years of experience in setting up multiple startups and leading work across a range of diverse sectors. He strongly believes in the power of interdisciplinarity, and in addition to his technology expertise, he brings a very strong social sciences and humanities perspective to his work. And lastly, but by no means least, Maria Axente, who is the Responsible AI and AI for Good lead at PricewaterhouseCoopers. In her role, Maria advises partners across industry, academia, governments, and more on how to harness the power of artificial intelligence in an ethical and responsible manner. And she's played a crucial part in the development and setup of PwC's UK AI Centre of Excellence, its AI strategy, and the development of PwC's Responsible AI Toolkit. So welcome, please, to my panel today. Right, panel. So I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, which is when I had to get on a train to get here from Yorkshire. So I'm firing on all cylinders. So I'm hoping for just exactly the same from you. In response to this question, why does AI need to do more? Why should we be setting aside, the kind of the glorious but perhaps directionally challenged ambitions of some of the big tech giants and actually doing meaningful things with AI? I'd like to ask each of you what your response to this topic is. How does AI need to do more? In what capacity? To what end? And in order to try to avoid what otherwise unwelcome outcomes. Juan, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I guess from my point of view, AI doesn't need to be more. It needs to be doing different. Mm-hmm. It feels that we are building. We are basically taking a Porsche SUV that we have trained to self-drive itself in Arizona streets and trying to get it to drive through bazaar in Cairo when we try to apply it in social impact sectors. And the reason for this is that this self-driving Porsche SUV, which is large language models, large deep learning models, and things like those, they have been developed to address the needs of large technology companies that have a lot of data, they have a lot of compute. They are trying to make recommendations to their users in social media platforms and e-commerce platforms. And that model is great for that, and I'm very excited about it. But actually, it's not very relevant for sectors where data is fragmented, where we need to be able to explain decisions, and where mistakes could cost lives.
Mm-hmm. And we'll come on to that a little bit more as we get into the discussion, but thank you for that insight. Danil, I want to quote you back at you, which is, you must read his blogs. They are beautifully written. So you at one point said the opportunity costs of artificial intelligence rejected by the public is already measured in diseases not cured, in lives not saved, in poverty not alleviated. Health and social systems across the world that are ripe for intervention are locked away from deploying AI by decision makers paralyzed into inaction and indecision by their fear of the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it is all too true. I wrote that about 3 years ago. I think it has possibly got worse since. The issue we have with AI is it's a combination of both hype on one end and a lack of attention on the other. It's a combination of overabundance in some areas and scarcity in the other areas. So we are very good at optimizing the sale of shoes to ourselves. We are very good at encouraging people to click on an extreme point of view. We are less good at and invest too little resources, frankly, in the social impact sector, as Juan rightly says, where the problems are much bigger, they're systemic, and frankly, we are under-resourcing that area. So in terms of, to answer the question, what do we need? We need to do it differently, you're right, but also more in a new area. So I want to see us training, encouraging AI engineers, data scientists to work more on areas like health, on areas like climate, but also not from a profit perspective, but from a perspective of encouraging human flourishing and environmental change. That means we need to train a whole new generation of data scientists, frankly, with slightly different skills. Yes, great technical skills, but also skills in social sciences, interdisciplinary skills. So they are able to ask the right questions and be aware of the longer-term consequences of what they do, which is really, really important if they will be successful in social impact problems.
And Maria, your role at PwC gives you the opportunity to talk with, global business leaders around the potential of these technologies in their own businesses, but also in the societies that those businesses operate in. What do you see from those discussions? Is this ambition that Danil and Juan have just articulated, is it moving forward in those conversations that you have?
Certainly is, but going back to your first question, is like, it doesn't need to do more. We need to do more to understand AI, align it with our goals, being optimization, being able to solve climate change, but also being able to work with it. We have a technology that has agency, that adapts to its external environment, that operates increasingly without human supervision, drifts because it's a non-deterministic. So how do we work with this type of artifacts and understand where do we need to fine-tune it? When do we understand that we need to have some KPIs in place to be able to monitor it? And also don't freak out when things will go wrong. How can we embrace the culture of cyber, fail and address very quickly? Because there will be things that go wrong, which is okay as long as we redress it quickly. And to me, that's the big point, is like AI is a technology. As I heard it yesterday in my panel, software engineering. Let's treat it in this way, but also do our job, really understand what sort of goals we need to align it, and also understand the magic behind the box, all the correlation the machines do and they are, for us, incapable to understand. And move away from making it a sensational topics like being conscient or taking over, but also I want to touch the subject Elon Musk, because I don't want us to forget about Elon Musk. And no matter what opinions we have about Elon Musk, he's a visionary. And we need vision. We need to see where this is going. How do we use technology to make the world a better place? And if we don't have a vision, we are not able to see the big picture. And that's what I like about Elon Musk, is that he is contested, but he attempts to break the status quo. How many times in the world of ethics we've said we need to challenge the boundaries, we need to challenge the status quo? So then why do we penalize Elon Musk for saying the same thing? We want things to change. How do you change things? Challenging the boundaries. So let's not forget about Elon Musk, because we can learn a thing or two from him, right?
So I'm hearing a real strong agreement across the panel that AI has real scope and capability to address some of these societal good issues that we feel we should be applying it to. But in order to unlock that, we need to do things differently, whether it's, as you've just made the point, Maria, dreaming differently, thinking differently, being challenging, or whether it's developing new methods of working, new interdisciplinary methods of working, or indeed addressing some of the structural and technical issues. I'd like to come back to all of those questions as we have this discussion today. But the first question I want to ask, and I ask this very much from our experience in the R² factory working to look at the application of AI to industrial problems, do we actually have the right quality of data to even get into this topic? Juan, I know you've done some work on this.
Yes, so I think we need to compare the situation in an e-commerce store like Amazon that's using industrial AI to make recommendations and optimize its logistics. Compare that with the situation in education, like schools in the UK. You have one Amazon, you have one big machine that collects data, models it, makes predictions. In the case of schools, we have 32,000 schools in the UK. Each of them is collecting data in slightly different ways, sometimes not collecting data, not analyzing it, not checking its quality. So basically, you have this very fragmented data ecosystem that makes it very difficult to integrate data in order to train any kind of machine learning model. We can't even do small data AI with that kind of data. So that's an issue. Just to give you an example of a situation I faced trying to collaborate with a school where we wanted to use machine learning to identify amazing teachers that we could learn from. We would want to identify those outliers to learn what they do and use that to train other teachers. we found that they hadn't connected data about classrooms with teachers. So we couldn't actually even figure out what teacher was teaching what students, and it was impossible to implement this method. And this was actually quite an advanced one. Like, it wasn't one of the ones that's lagging behind. That's the reason why we were talking with them. So the data is just not, it's fragmented, and even inside organizations, it's not connected in a way that we can really use to do data science for social impact.
And Danil, I know that data.org has done a lot of work looking at how to pull together the sorts of data collaborations that can underpin some of this activity. I'm really interested in something one of your colleagues wrote around the challenges facing us from the need to decolonize data, which I thought was a really interesting idea. Could you explain a little bit about what that means and maybe how that shows up in your work? Sure,
absolutely. So Rhonda Green wrote an excellent blog about it. One of the issues we have is that a lot of the analysis, the innovation, the creation of tools, the generation of demand around data happens in the global north. Unfortunately, what it means is we're not investing in capacity building in low and middle income countries, but often we also extract data from low and middle income countries in a way which doesn't give value back to those countries. So we're not investing, number one, and we're extracting, number two. That's where the issue of colonialism comes across. It happens in data like 200 years ago, it happened in other resources extraction. So that is a very big problem, because what it does is undermines trust around those communities, because they don't see the value going back to them in the way that would encourage their own local economies, local skills growth. Mm-hmm. So I think the problem of data colonialism and how uneven the spread of investment is across the world is a really big one. It hurts us massively. So, for example, during the pandemic, what we needed to do in the scientific community is share data around the emergence of new variants as fast as possible. But of course, data sharing is very hard if as soon as you give your data away, the value doesn't come back. Data sharing is also very hard where you're punished for sharing it. So when South Africa, for example, famously, and we should be all hugely grateful to them, have analyzed and saw the rise of Omicron variant, the first thing that happened is all countries closed their borders to South African travel. So we actually punished the country for putting the investment in building the data infrastructure to be able to analyze and detect a variant. So those kind of things are really, really destructive and harm trust.
Mm-hmm. And Maria, help us understand, what the risks are if we don't get, this right, if we don't think more clearly about how we work on developing artificial intelligences for these social programs of work with the right good in mind. I know that in your work for PwC around AI ethics, that's been fundamental to thinking about both the context and the technical delivery of ethical AI.
Obviously, we need to have a taxonomy of risk and really understand it. There are many industries that wouldn't have a mature risk management because they didn't have to. And I would say that I'm quite concerned that looking at an application of AI, especially in public sector, they wouldn't have a discipline called risk management. And I was working with ICO, and they produced the AI in data risk management toolkit. And one of the concerns I highlighted is that we need to build capacity of understanding and managing risk, which is more compliance. So really understanding that AI needs to have a layer of compliance attached to it. But in order to really understand the risk, we need to take a step back and understand the consequences, both positive and unintended and intended, but also positive and negatives, and start from there at each context. Yes, you can categorize risk into risk that have to do with the application, risk to do that application will augment the risk existing with an organization and societal risk. But really, it's really good to have a clear taxonomy so that we know exactly who addresses them. Some of the risk, like risk of bias or explainability, the black box, can be addressed by technical experts. But when we talk about risk of job displacement, for example, or risk of reputational risk that's attached with misuse of technology by companies, that's not something that the data scientist could do. It's an unfair to tag that risk or the risk mitigation to them when this is more assigned to those who own the technology or business leaders. I think that we need to be thinking what are the risks, but also think about building an ecosystem to address the risk, I would say, in a more organic manner. Sometimes, keep on saying the best way to mitigate the risk in AI, it's consider ethics from the start. The best mitigation of risk of AI, it's really think about ethics. Because if you are looking into debiasing, the best thing you can do is actually start early and say, what sort of fairness would I aspire to have in the outcome I produce with my models?
Thank you, Maria. And I'd really like to just lean a little bit more into that question about how we mitigate some of those risks that you've called out there. One of the things that I found very interesting in some of the writing of yours that I was reading was this challenge that you raise around whether we're really using the right ML techniques in these contexts with these types of data to start with. So talk to us a little bit about, how some of the kind of the big AI techniques, the complex and opaque AI techniques may not really be risk appropriate for the use cases that we're describing when we're talking about social and health use cases. Help us understand that a bit.
Yeah, so I guess the way I think about it is as a data scientist, I guess I have a toolkit, and I have different tools in that toolkit, and one of those tools is big language models and things like that, and actually I can use them for some things. Like, for example, we use them a lot when we are trying to map a domain where there's a lot of unstructured data. And for example, we have created maps of jobs that are exposed to automation, where we analyze online job adverts and the text descriptions of those adverts to see what jobs are close to what jobs and how people in a job that is exposed to automation might be moving to other jobs. We're doing something similar now, mapping food, 25 opportunities for reformulation of different foods in a way that makes them healthier. Deep learning, great for that. However, if you're in a situation where you want to put in place an intervention, like for example, for a child in the care system, identify children at risk, or in the criminal justice system, people who might jump bail. Actually, in that context, you need to not just be able to predict, you need to be able to explain the situation so that we are able to understand why the model is making a recommendation. And also so that we can think about, it's almost like in a more sophisticated way about what we might do about the prediction. Just to give you an example, there's a very nice paper by this MIT researcher called Chelsea Barabas, who looked at predictive and explanatory models in the criminal justice system. What she was saying there is that if you use purely predictive models just to predict someone is at risk of recidivism, then the only intervention that you are going to be able to come up with is to deny them bail so that they don't jump bail. If you have models which allow you to explain what are the drivers for that person jumping bail, then you can put in place interventions which are going to change their context and change their situation in a way that addresses the outcome without sending them to jail, which we know is more likely to is going to increase the likelihood that they become longer-term criminals.
So we need to put causality back in as well as
Causality,
correlation, essentially.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Danil, help us, in the work that you do, you address some of these risks that Maria's articulated, as I understand it, through this interdisciplinariness, is that a word? Anyway, it'll do for now. Help us understand, how does that mitigate some of these issues that are being raised and the risks that result from these issues?
Sure, I can give you both a macro and a micro explanation of it. So, taking our start from what Juan just said, in that example Juan gave, in order to do an explanatory intervention, you need to have the technical skills, but you also need to understand what interventions would work once you have the results of your analysis. Those are skills from humanities and social sciences. So that's the point about interdisciplinarity. In order to have the right outcome, the right impact in the world, you need scholars across those disciplines collaborating closely together. So you need social scientists, behavioral scientists, economists, policymakers, working much, much closer than they currently are with technologists. Otherwise, what you do is do the analysis, you might establish the cause, the explanation, but you don't have then the right action following straight away. So that's kind of the macro example of how to bring it together. You need, if you like, to invest in those interdisciplinary skills. One of the things Datadog is doing at the moment is we are building hubs across the world, particularly focused on low, middle-income countries, to train a new generation of data scientists with those interdisciplinary skills. So the curricula we're introducing have modules not just in hard coding skills, in statistics, in Python, etc., but also skills relevant to the social impact world. How to work with vulnerable communities, how to formulate the right question, which come more from social sciences. So that's kind of on the macro level. On a micro level, I used to manage a tech team in my prior job in Welcome Data Labs. Juan knows we've collaborated before. And we did an experiment in that team. So we had, it's a full-on AI product team. We had data scientists, software engineers, designers, UX, etc., working to produce products. We introduced a social scientist into the mix. So we embedded a social scientist into that team, and not just in a way that every now and again somebody comes in and does a critique, but actually a person works with them following the agile life cycle, so the rhythm of the team. And it took a long time. It took a long time for them to gel because they come from different cultures, different languages. They didn't speak fundamentally the right language together. So there was a lot of kind of initial misunderstandings, but over time we persevered, and over time a common language started to develop between the social scientists and the tech experts. And they started, for example, asking different questions about, okay, how do we set the threshold in this model? Like, what exactly do we care about? They got an understanding that making a very technical decision, what they thought was a very technical decision, has a social consequence downstream. So that kind of experimentation, how do we work together, how do we build interdisciplinarity, is really important. It is not easy. It took us a lot of effort and time, but it bears positive results.
I think that's fascinating, although I had a vision in my mind of a white rat, kind of, like having been dropped into your experimentation phase. I'm not sure that's not what you were doing at all. Maria, forgive me, this data is a little bit old, and please feel free to correct me if you have much fresher data, because this is what I was able to find. But in 2019, the PwC did a responsible AI diagnostic survey. And at that point, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, the level of understanding and application of responsible and ethical AI practices was really quite immature. How have you seen that progress? How have you seen that improve since then? Is there still more ground to cover? Because the kinds of mitigating strategies that Danil and Juan are talking about here ultimately will need to be bought off, right, by decision makers inside the organizations that are paying for this work or commissioning this work. So I'm interested, how well does that group understand the challenge that they're potentially facing?
We've made phenomenal progress, and I think it's due to CogX, in events like CogX, where we are able to bring on stages and raise awareness about how should we think about AI. And I think what Danil was saying about bringing social sciences, but also a different type of expertise into the mix is critical. But in order to do this, we need to reframe AI a little bit. I think for far too long, AI was labeled a GPT, general purpose technology. But in fact, for a while, we've been saying AI is a socio-technical system. And if you frame it in this way, naturally, you will need social scientists. So you don't have to fight to bring the social scientists in the place, because that would be their role to work together with technologies. And I think we're not there yet in the business to have this definition, but since someone like NIST in the US, the standard institution, have said it out loud that we should think about AI in these terms, I'm hoping the trend will change. But I've seen conversation with our clients and the way it's being framed, that they understand we need to be thinking about collaboration. And in a way, we had these pockets of good practice, especially in innovation, but we don't know how to do it right other than a one-off, a product level. So how do we transform the culture so it becomes natural to engage with different experts? As you've pointed out, the experience in R Squared is like, it's all about collaboration. Ethics is all about engaging with different audiences. It's about challenging the assumption or the hypothesis a scientist makes about a specific problems. And if you look at all the misuses of technology, at least the ones that have been in the media, the ones that someone like Cathy O'Neill has audited, the problem was neither with the data or the algorithms, or how the hypotheses were made, how you made the abstraction or complex social structure into a mathematical model is where things go massively wrong. So this is where the businesses are at the moment. It's understanding that's much more to AI that we considered before. There's the need to rethink how we approach AI being used not just as a transformative tool, but a disruptive tool. And how do you manage this transformation? But I think they are more prepared to it because they start to see the benefit. AI is delivering on the promise with boring application of AI. But that gives confidence to business leaders that we are on the right track. More needs to be done, but I'm very excited to see that companies are picking up. One area where I wish them to be a bit more bold is to actually allocate budget for ethicists. I want to see more job position in a lot of companies that says AI ethicist or technology ethicist. I can't stress how important it is to have a person that is able to work with the technical team, with the social scientists, aggregate all those different views, but also being able to advise the business leaders on those issues.
Now that really brings me on to the next question I wanted to ask, which is, in these contexts, when we're dealing with these kinds of societal questions, who gets to say when the ethically required standards have actually been met? Who has the authority to say, yes, that meets the standards we want as a society?
What is ethics?
Well, quite.
That's it. Yes, we have to start with that question. The fact that ethics is subjective, is linked with values, and we have so many different values set, and it's contextual. What is fair in one context, it will not be fair in another context. So I think we have to be very precise what we want to measure and how do we want to measure, and to be very precise what sort of a guardrails we want to set up and for what, guardrails for what. I think if we have that precision and framing and definition, that we'll be able to measure. And keep in mind, ethics is a qualitative layer we apply. How do we quantify benefits of an AI application? That's hard. So we have to, in order to quantify, we also have to have quantitative measures. And how we establish that, that's probably a biggest challenge of all, especially a fairness, right?
I mean, I'm thinking back, sorry, Danil, go ahead.
If that's okay, I'll just entirely agree with Maria was saying, and to add a bit of extra to it. So who gets to decide is fundamentally possibly one of the hardest questions and most important questions. It's partly to do with power. There's power dynamics and asymmetry of power around decision making. We currently kind of centralize decision making in, frankly, a few companies in one tiny part of the world, or maybe two parts of the world, west coast of USA and east coast of China. That is not the right model for entirely right. A socio-technical global system of systems. There are multiple socio-technical systems which make up what we discuss as AI. We need to begin to decentralize. We need to change the power dynamic. We need to introduce participatory design. So when we talk about creating new products, the people who should be part of the process are the people who will be affected by that product. So if you're building a tool, an application of some sort that will be used, let's say, I come a lot from the health data domain, let's say to analyze a disease that's prevalent in Latin America, for lack of a better example. Don't design that system in Seattle or San Francisco. Design that system in Colombia. Yeah. Design a system with the people who are affected. Have participatory design. So as an example, in data.org, we are building a set of open source tools for pandemic prevention called EPIVERS program. We have worked with universities in Colombia, Universidad Javeriana and Los Andes, with great scholars who are building the software there and working with the communities affected there to design it better. It's not only more equitable, it's also more effective as products.
I'm wondering if we need something, and we may already have this, and if so, please tell me, but I'm wondering if we need something the equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath, but for AI development. Do we need a first do no harm statement? Is that what we require?
It's been such a conversation for a long time in the data science field, and I think there was some attempt to draft that. I know of an attempt of that. It's called Munich Oxford Code of Conduct for Data Scientists, so check it out. It's quite interesting. I think we might be able to have different governance instruments we might use. And thinking about this dynamic between global and local, one instrument that has been in the shade, didn't have a lot of attention, are standards. I've been working with ISO and BSI, also with IEEE. The standards are very good instrument to standardize and create clear metrics for everyone in different types of contexts, standards and certifications. So watch out the space. UK government has such program on AI standards that's run by DCMS and Turing. So it'd be very interesting how our experience in developing standards will be useful in offering us a way to measure different applications, different contexts, and being able to have confidence that we have a certain level of quality.
And I want, Juan, just to sum up this section now, and before we throw it open to questions from the audience, back to that idea about who gets to say when ethical standards have been met. You talked before about the criticality of having explainable answers when you are using ML to make recommendations that, you know, pertinently and directly affect someone's life in an educational context, in a healthcare context, in a justice context. How do we get to a world where the individuals who might be the recipients of those decisions are involved in saying whether they feel comfortable with the ethical standards that those decisions have been made using?
So I guess this is a question of, it goes back to the point that Maria made at the beginning about us needing to do more, in the sense that we just need to build organizations that are able to take that kind of feedback and change how they operate. And I think we are very far away from being able to do that. I think that still that kind of responsiveness to someone being unhappy about the rationale for a decision is too downstream.
Right.
And I think that we need to go further upstream and think about, in line with things that Danil was saying as well, it's almost like, how do we decide what type of AI system do we want to bring into an organization, and what is the purpose that this has? I guess my concern is that very often we bring AI systems into social impact sectors from a perspective of efficiency and optimization and saving costs and automating. And then we think that we could have explainable models and we could have fairness, but that isn't going to make the systems just and actually addressing the needs of the communities that are part of that sector, who are often the most vulnerable. So it's almost like, how do we start to think about how we use AI and bring AI into organizations, not just to do that optimization, but to do innovation, and in some cases transform these organizations rather than try and making them more efficient. And again, that's going to take a lot of humility from those organizations and their data scientists, and a lot of participation in bringing those communities into the conversation right from the beginning. Yeah, there's a lot of work ahead.
That's hugely thought-provoking. I mean, I understand that as saying, how do we build AIs for a societal outcome first, as opposed to a process optimization outcome first, which is a really thought-provoking question. At that point, I'd like to see if there are any questions from the audience. Yes, I can see a hand up there, a couple of hands up, the lady at the back there too. Please do go ahead. If you could let us know who you are, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Louise Marston. I work for Resolution Ventures, an impact investor. Are there some areas where AI should just steer clear? What are the characteristics of the problems where AI is not ready to be applied, where we should just be walking away from them right now because the capabilities aren't there?
Go ahead,
I can throw out one great question. I'm really nervous about surveillance of different types and applying AI in those spaces. We are not, as a society, have not had enough time to work through the hard questions. I was born in a totalitarian country. I am terrified by the prospect of a country, it was Soviet Union in my case, becoming really efficient and knowing what I'm doing every second of my life. One of the great benefits of the USSR was it was rubbish at bureaucracy and rubbish at internal surveillance. So citizens had some abilities to have private space. If you add AI surveillance at scale, efficient, effective, on top of that, that's a horrific dystopia. So I'm really worried about it. There's also issues around, racial biases, particularly, for example, in the US context, a great amount of work done in that space. So surveillance for me is a real, it causes me to be really nervous.
I think Maria wants to add something.
Yes,
Quickly,
I found it a very interesting concept. I'm stealing from one of my clients, so it's not mine. But they describe something in relation to how they use AI in their processes, moments that matter. And those moments that matters are interaction between humans that should never be delegated to the machine. Using AI in recruitment, or using to develop chatbots to interact with their employees and picking up whenever they are in distress or have mental problems. Those are the moments that we should capture or should lock as never touched by the machine. I think we've had this conversation. When do we use AI? To replace human or to augment humans, to automate? I think we need to have a little bit of a more honest conversation about what do we expect for those machines to do for us. And if we find areas that machines should never touch, don't do it. For example, I'm a big fan of classical music, and I was very excited that they use AI to finish Beethoven 10th Symphony. I listened to it. Nothing. Sounded like Beethoven, but nothing. So why should we allow AI to create music that don't go there? Music is an activity that's so human. It's not just about sounds. It's about helping us connect with the environment, connect with each other. So I think it's important for us to be honest. Where do we want the machines to do for us? And when do we allow the machine to come into what's supposed to be human-led?
Juan, you wanted to make a comment too, I think.
Yeah, such a great question, Luis. And I guess leaving aside almost like use cases for AI, which are frankly ethical no-nos, like emotion recognition. Obviously, like we have heard a lot about weapons and military systems, and moving towards almost like fussier areas. Like, for example, areas where we know that it's very difficult to make good predictions about outcomes because they are so complex. Like, for example, what's going to happen in the life of a child based on their current situation. There was a very interesting project by sociologists working with data scientists in Princeton, the Fragile Families Challenge, where they collected a lot of data and they tried to see whether they could predict children's outcomes using that data, and they found, no, you can't predict because it's such a complex outcome. And I think in that case, then the question is, do you want to use machine learning if it's impossible to make predictions? And I would say, yes, you should use machine learning, but actually this is just going to be something that generates some information, some signal for a human who's going to be looking at this together with other data to make a decision. So basically we are moving from a paradigm of artificial intelligence, which is about automating, to a paradigm of intelligence augmentation, where the machine learning system is just creating additional information that helps an organization to make better decisions, even if sometimes the decision is to not do anything with the recommendation for the system because it's not reliable enough.
I think we have time for one more question. There was a lady with her hand up there at the back.
Hi, thanks for the talk. My name's Charisma and I work for a sales intelligence startup. One of the things you said at the start, which I thought was really interesting, was about vision. And I was wondering if you had any examples of sort of companies who you think have really good vision in terms of sort of how AI can impact the social sector and also sort of how they're executing on that vision.
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure about a company, but I have a person in mind and a kind of academic team which I wanted to bring up. So a great collaborator of mine, Regina Barzilay, who is based at MIT C-Sales School. So great example of somebody who is an amazing innovator in terms of AI, technical skills, but is applying those skills in areas of social impact. So one of the things, she was part of the team that discovered Halicin, one of the antibiotics using ML approaches. Like that is an amazing, we have too few antibiotics left in our arsenal to fight diseases as we get more resistance. That application is exactly the kind of things we should be doing. It is looking at structure of molecules, it is helping to speed up the process of discovery, and it's looking and targeting an area of life all of us will be affected by as diseases unfortunately continue and become more resistant in the future. At the same time, she in a different project, and this shows her versatility, she was using AI to decode an ancient Greek language. So it's just, you know, creativity, amazing application in areas of real social need, great technical skills. So there are great people, great leaders in this space, and I'm sure there are also in companies as well as in academia, in social impact sector, that we can all uplift.
Mary?
And perhaps they definitely do not need any spotlight because we all know they are great, but DeepMind is a good example, right? Their vision is to solve intelligence, and look at AlphaFold, right? So the applications and having open source. I was on attended a panel yesterday, and just made me realize how much they have opened, the sea of possibilities they have opened by doing this research, making it accessible, especially for countries that do not have technology capabilities. Like, for example, diseases that are very specific to a part of the world, and you will have specialists in the field, and they wouldn't have the resources, and suddenly you have AlphaFold that offers you a lot for you to solve your problem. So I would say DeepMind.
Mm-hmm. And Juan, is there anyone you'd like to call out?
So I guess, like, actually just to add to Maria's point about DeepMind, I think something that's interesting, leaving aside the open source, amazing, like release strategy with AlphaFold, is just the fact that they have adopted a very interdisciplinary, very humanistic approach to how they think about societal impacts of their technologies, and they are putting out lots of really cool papers looking at how do you use causal models to look at bias, ethics of AI from a philosophical perspective. So a lot of thought leadership in that space that's coming from them, and really, I would say, capturing the crossover, hybridized, humanistic spirit to doing AI, which I guess we have all been calling for in this panel.
Absolutely. I have a couple of candidates, and I think we'll close on those if we don't mind. But my couple of candidates, one would be Plan A. Ludmila Jordanova runs Plan A, which is a startup looking at using AI to help organizations address their carbon emissions, which I think is a really interesting program of work. And they've just now launched in the UK, set up, I think, in Germany originally. And then my second is an oldie and a goodie, Mitchell Baker, who was the founder of Mozilla. And many of you in the room will remember Mozilla, the original Creative Commons of the internet. And I think probably the grandmother of some of the ideas that we've been talking about here today. So if you haven't come across Mitchell Baker before, I would definitely go and look her up. And at that point, I think we need to draw stumps. Thank you so much for coming along to this session this morning. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please thank my panel with a round of applause.